An update tonight to a story that we've been following for 6 years, a group of islands along the Louisiana coast that have vanished before our eyes. The state plans to resurrect at least one of them at a cost of millions of dollars. Tonight, the question, should it? At sea level, where there had been a thriving metropolis each spring and summer, an avian ghost town.
Oh, it's heartbreaking.
After years of steadily eroding, what locals call Cat Island has finally vanished from view.
We're in about 2 feet of water here.
In mid-tide, with winds out of the south, the remains of the island lie below the surface. In another spot, the boat's GPS reads 4.6 feet of water, where not long ago there had been land.
After the hurricane season this year, it's probably going to be the end of the island, but I'm still confident it can be rebuilt.
Cat Bay was awash in crude during the oil spill, which Plaquemines Parish government says hastened its demise. 6 years ago, this island spread over 5 acres. Today, we see the skeletal remains of half a dozen mangrove trees popping up out of the water. That is all that is left. A couple miles away, P.J. Hahn, the former Plaquemines coastal director, shoots drone video of the last remaining island in Cat Bay. Pelicans cling to a ribbon of sand, barely the size of a lot in suburbia. Some mature birds compete with egrets for prime nesting spots, and a few lucky chicks might be the final generation here.
The natural cycle is telling us that's all going to go underwater.
But geologist Chris McClendon points out natural forces also chew at the coast. Over the last 6,000 years, the Mississippi River built 16 separate deltas. As the fickle river changed course, the Gulf destroyed them in an endless battle of land and sea. Google Earth maps show the islands steadily declining from 1998 to pre-spill, and the view from space just last year.
And you can see the sediment just streaming off of that island. So, but that whole area is sinking and has been sinking.
Cut off from the river by levees and starved of fresh water and sediment, the delta sinks. NOAA scientists say Grand Isle, just miles to the west, subsides at a rate 9 times faster than Key West, Florida.
Trying to build land in a center of subsidence right there is fighting against nature. You're fighting against the forces of nature there. And, you know, I think the logical conclusion would be you're probably not going to prevail in that battle.
Should we spend the money? Should we try?
I wouldn't recommend it.
McClendon says a smarter play might be to establish a rookery for pelicans in a more stable area. The problem, wildlife experts say, the young birds imprint on the island where they hatched. They want to nest there. Only a half dozen large pelican rookeries remain in Louisiana, and all of them, to one degree or another, are in trouble.
Protecting what we can and restoring what we can with available sediment nearby is something that we need to start doing now so that we don't get to a case where we have so little habitat that we start having those population declines.
The island is slated to get money from the BP settlement for damage to natural resources.
Now all we need is the construction funds, which we're looking at least another 2 more years before we see the construction funds.
In the meantime, so little of the island remains, Hahn says the estimated cost of restoration has doubled to $12 million.
Nobody has to tell me it's gone. I see it's gone, but I can tell you that it's critical habitat for the birds in this area.
The first round of the BP money, the fine money, pays for engineering and design. That has already been done on Cat Island, so they'll apparently have to wait 2 years to get funding, while more of what remains under the surface disappears. This could be the solution to one of the many challenges protecting Louisiana's coast. Simply roll it up, stick it in the ground, and neutralize nutria. Volunteers trudge through an area that's not quite land, not quite water.
Save yourself.
On a recent Saturday, several dozen dedicated souls plant cypress trees near Big Mar.
I definitely like the cause. I mean, anything to restore the wetland. It is a very vital part of Louisiana.
In recent years, coastal groups and volunteers have planted 35,000 trees, mostly cypress, in the Maurepas Swamp south of Hammond and in Big Mar near the Plaquemines-St. Bernard Parish line.
They're nature's levees.
Beyond the levees, giants reside. The largest living things east of the Sierra Nevada mountains grow in the cypress swamps of Louisiana. Nature's defenses can be seen from outer space. This Google Earth map displays a massive area of marsh and forest stretching from the populated areas along River Road all the way to Thibodaux. They provided defenses against hurricanes centuries before anyone put up a flood wall or fired up a pumping station. Not by coincidence, coastal groups have focused on areas that provide a buffer to man-made defenses. In Big Mar, they're planting cypress in front of Plaquemines Parish levees.
Swamp forest is one of the best habitats for deflecting storm surge. They do really, really well in high winds. They don't get destroyed.
The plantings began modestly several years ago and failed miserably.
We planted 200 trees. We lost all 200.
At first, they thought it might be shifting land, giving way under the trees. But when another planting failed, they settled on public enemy number one, the rat that ate Louisiana. Nutria were gobbling up the tiny, defenseless trees.
They prefer to eat on the basal portions of the plants, the bottoms of the plants, near the roots, which kills the plant. The plant relinquishes its hold on the soil, and you get more erosion, which is already, a critical problem along the coast.
They also damage coastal marshes, levees, canals.
They're a hassle everywhere they exist.
At one point in the late 90s, state surveys estimated that annually Nutria were munching on 100,000 acres of Louisiana, damaging that much land. They were chewing us out of home. Today, it's about 1/10 that, thanks to a $5 a head state bounty program. Trappers take 400,000 nutria from the marsh each year. But nutria reproduce like nutria.
They're in the rodent family, so they do reproduce like rodents. They average maybe 4 or 5 pups per litter, but they can be up to 10 or 12, and they can reproduce 2 or 3 times a year.
The population explosion brought the sobering realization that it would be impossible for new cypress forests to grow, either naturally or through plantings.
As soon as you get a seedling, even if it naturally germinates, with all the other problems that trees have germinating out here, the nutria just eat the seedlings, and then you're not going to get any germination.
They found the solution in a Nutria Protector, a $1.50 biodegradable guard that frustrates the rodents trying to munch on the tree. A Lake Pontchartrain Basin Foundation survey finds a dramatic increase in the survival rate in recent years.
Since those 2 plantings, since we started putting Nutria Protectors on every tree, we are up to 78%.
Thanks to the Nutria Protector, it just might be possible, after all, to give giants their start in life. So the Lake Pontchartrain Basin Foundation estimates about 30,000 of these trees in these 2 brand new forests, if you will, and they just roll it up, tie it together, stick the cypress tree down in there, and the nutria can't get to it. And then what happens, it's biodegradable, feels like plastic, but it's not. It's biodegradable, and what happens is the tree just ultimately just bursts out of it at a point when it's big enough that the nutria can't gobble up, a tree that might be 1,500 years old someday, if it ever got a chance.
A mud fight is raging in Louisiana and involves the fierce debate over the best way to save part of Louisiana's coast.
In a special report, John Snell tells us the state is looking at even more of the controversial projects.
Behold a rare sight. As it did over the centuries, the Mississippi River adds on to the Delta. From a helicopter, Simone Malaz of the group Restore or Retreat takes in brand new land.
It's one of the few examples of an on-the-ground project that we have.
The Davis Pond diversion went online about a decade ago, but was never meant to be a land builder.
And this, frankly, is just freshwater. This is just a freshwater diversion.
Davis Pond was merely designed to help keep nearby waters from getting too salty.
There's all the evidence in the world, again, that there's still plenty of sediment to do some of the things that we want to do.
Engineers plan to go deeper in the water column in strategic spots on the river to tap into muddier waters and land building silt. 2 larger diversions are planned downstream from New Orleans. And now planners are looking at the possibility of a 3rd sediment diversion in the neighborhood of Davis Pond.
That's just downstream of the current Davis Pond diversion that would benefit some of the same area.
The project could be included in the state's newest master plan for the coast, due out in early 2017. Despite the state's ambitious agenda, a lot of other interests are going to weigh in on this issue, including the powerful shipping industry. The industry has not opposed diversions, but wants to know how sticking big straws into the river would affect navigation. Many fishermen fear doom for their livelihoods.
You have to look at what you're going to give up for what you're going to get. Is it worth it?
No one has been more vocal in his opposition than charter boat captain George Ricks.
They're going to turn both of the estuaries, Barataria and Breton, totally fresh from February to July, which is going to wipe out our spawning seasons for everything that we need our spawning seasons for. There's not just going to be shifts in fisheries. There's going to be some devastation to the fishing industry.
Even many disciples of diversions now say the giant structures would need to be managed for the least impact on fisheries. They would operate only at certain times of the year, only during high river periods when the river is richest in silt.
Lack of sediment is our largest issue.
The new Coastal Protection Chairman, Johnny Bradbury, says the state is looking at the option of moving oyster leases affected by diversions and paying the oystermen.
We don't want you to lose your business totally, and we just have to see how that diversion really affects that particular area where your lease resides.
Where are they going to get all the money from? That's the thing. A compensatory mitigation in this case is going to be phenomenal. I don't know where the state's going to get the money. I just have no idea.
Even Bradbury concedes he doesn't know at this point where he would get the money. Skeptics argue the modern river no longer carries enough sediment to do the job. They say the solution is to dredge, suck mud from the water bottom, and build land by pipeline instantly.
If you're going to build a garden, okay, are you going to pump water on it first, or you're going to put soil down first and then plant seed and then put water on it? It's like you're trying to build land with water. I mean, does it make sense to spend $3 billion and hope in 50 years it works?
Yet in the city of New Orleans, we walk on land that was built with water. I mean, it took 7,000 years to build that land.
I mean, it's going to change with or without you, and we have to do something. We have to do something. And there is not unlimited resources and supplies and money. And we think that returning the system to its natural form as best as we can and controlling it as best as we can is the right way to go.
State officials point to hundreds of millions of dollars in dredging projects already completed or in the planning pipeline. But they say relying on dredging alone does nothing to change the forces that caused the land loss in the first place.
It's not just about building land, it's about building and maintaining land over time compared to future without. And we think that those projects would do substantial good.
Dredging a half mile of beach can cost tens of millions of dollars. Diversions were always supposed to be more cost-effective in the long run. However, the latest estimate for the two downriver diversions could rock the debate. $600 million for Mid-Breton on the east bank, $1.3 billion for Mid-Barataria to the west. But when you start talking about numbers like $2 billion, do you get to a point, if it goes much higher, where you start to lose the cost benefit?
Yeah. Again, we're looking at those numbers, and I would say you have a great point. And yes, there comes a point where you have to look at the economics strongly of this thing and what the cost benefit is and what we really achieved by embarking on the projects.
Both sides of this mud fight talk of urgency.
We have to be realistic, and we have to take a common sense approach. Take this limited amount of funds and build land now. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, maybe we won't be able to save it all, but we're going to be able to do something. But we have to start. We have to start.
The state says it's letting science drive the decisions.
I think we're looking at on the order of 3 to 5 years before construction might start.
Skeptics consider that goal overly optimistic. The federal permitting process usually works at a glacial pace. John Snell, Fox 8 News.